Welcome to the latest episode of Enterprising Minds. We just started talking and realized we needed to hit record, so we're gonna redo what we fell into because it's we found it quite interesting. And there's a play between one catching up Ruthi with what happened this week. There were a lot of announcements with AI this week, even though. Well, I should say this week we're recording. It'll be different from when you're hearing it. And then, so kind of what's new, what's coming. And then Alex was forced to sit through some corporate trainings on where the rest of the world is with AI. So I think it'll be a good discussion back and forth of new and exciting and reality. So, yeah, we're all here and I'll just launch it. So I watched the OpenAI announcement on Monday. What was that? The 15th of May when they did their 4.0 announcement, which if you haven't watched it, it was an interesting juxtaposition to the way that we're used to seeing tech companies announce things. It was very low key. It had a very shared co-working space vibe, even though everybody was a ChatGPT employee and they were overly excited about, mundane updates. But good for them. It was fun to watch. But the things that they did announce, if you haven't seen it, were really interesting in terms of being able to do voice, as well as interrupting the output while it's doing it, so that if it's going a certain way that you don't like or it missed the point, you can tell it to stop and change it and adapt real time, which is really cool. But then also through your mobile phone, you can show what you're working on a whiteboard and have it comment on that, or give me the data that's here. What would you help me figure out this linear equation, and it will read it. It'll tell you what it sees and then do the rest of your prompt, which is very cool. The desktop version of that, you can share your screen for however amount of time you want, and it will read what's on your screen and then comment on what it's seeing, and then you can query whatever it is you're looking at. So if you're reading a particularly dense article or a really busy marketing graph that we're all subjected to quite frequently, that could be very useful. Especially if depending on what time of day you see that chart, you can just tell me what I'm looking at. And you can at least get there a little bit. So that was all very cool. That was Monday. Tuesday was Google I/O, and they announced a lot of the same things with being able to walk around and have the AI assistant tell you what's this code doing on this computer screen, or what part of the impressive thing was they showed out the office window and said, where am I? And it said, it looks like you're in King's Cross. Like it could tell from the rooftops that it was in King's Cross, London. And then as this woman walked through the office with, the phone going on, she walked around this set of desks, did a bunch of other queries, and then said, hey, do you remember where I put my glasses? And I said, yeah, it's over on the desk by the Apple. And she walked over, and it had tracked everything that was in that video, remembered it so that she could query what was there, which is very cool. But also, if you do anything with internal information security, holy God, is that a problem? So that, that's all very cool and very, very new. But then the big thing was the AI overview announcement. And I thought it was very interesting as someone with a MBA in communications. The way they chose to frame it, all the announcements, was very much Google in the era of AI, or in the Gemini era, right? So it's no longer what we were used to. It is now this new point in time that is separate from what was before. And their big catchphrase was, let Google do the Googling for you, which is interesting. So they talked a lot about being able to do voice and video and, other kinds of queries. They're adding reasoning and planning to the results. So the example that they showed was I just moved to Chicago. Show me all of the yoga studios within 1.5 miles of this location that has these reviews or whatever. And it pulled all of it, and it can show you the best places, the routes, like how far away they are. So that the planning a family trip even is its own like special thing that they have now, where you can input a bunch of things and change things around to say, you know what, my family likes to sleep in, so let's not do the walking tour on Saturday, do it Sunday. And they go, okay, great, you hear these times, do you want to book that out? So it was very cool. From a traditional SEO standpoint, the queries that people will start putting in are going to be very long and almost impossible to target, because they, if it is multi-step reasoning and you have to know your customer so well that it will play to a certain type of organization. So the funny thing, and then I'll stop talking, was after the conference, I did what almost every other marketer does, which is, you don't attend anything unless you post about it on, LinkedIn or whatever, right? So I grabbed a link to the blog and I just said, hey, one of the things I like about search is that it's constantly evolving and it's constantly challenging you to up your game and think more strategically and understand things in a more deep level. So this is very cool, but if you don't have your digital operations around and set up properly, you're already late. For the multi-step reasoning example that they had, it was name, address, phone number. It was the local reviews. It was your website and all of the additional markup that is needed for all of these optional extras in the SERP that are all going to be playing into those types of results. So if you want to be able to show up, you need to be as close to digitally perfect as you possibly can be. And yeah, because it's going to rely on a larger amount of data and knowledge about you as an organization, how trustworthy you are, and all of the things that you offer in order to, serve up the results for, I want to do a yoga studio and grab a smoothie between these hours in this neighborhood, So it's all very cool and very new. So we're going to be thinking through it live, real time. So thoughts, problems, questions, uh-ohs, concerns.
I'll talk about Google, and then I've got notes on GPT-4o.
Okay.
I don't know if that's the correct phrasing yet. We'll have to learn that over time.
You're fine.
Okay, so first of all, Google, though, you're not late. It's just that they're building off of the same information architecture. right?
Right.
The infrastructure of the information from which Google in particular, maybe other LLMs are pulling, is still the same. And so at least for the time being, providing that information in a structured way is a fundamentally different sort of interaction that you're having. It's just that instead of you clicking this time, open now, take out, yada, 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 you're just waiting for you, and then it's going to do more reasoning. Man, given the state of paid search, just junk in our ads right now, I'm not filled with a ton of confidence. Like, I really hope Google comes through, but at the moment, I just get frustrated using it all the time because all you get are ads, and then you scroll, maybe you get one or two organic results that may or may not be helpful, and then just more of the exact same ads. And so if Google could use its awesome new powers, or perhaps refresh its existing powers to provide better results, paid or otherwise, I'd be a happy camper. Like, that would just make me a much happier Google user. The maps and AI thing, that's cool. I mean, when you say like, oh, I knew you were in King's Cross, London, I couldn't help but think, but Google Maps is a thing. So maybe it just looked at where they were on the map, and like maybe it knew from the rooftops. Maybe it also has connected those two technologies, which in and of itself is also quite powerful. And I'm going to have to think about the space memory idea that you tossed out. I don't have any knee-jerk, like, here's what I think that could do, but I'm sure that, you know, if I noodle on it for a little bit, I can come up with some things. I don't know. Any thoughts on Google? Otherwise, I'll jump over to GPT.
Mm-hmm. One was just, I was pulling up this stat because I was curious if it's changed, and it has. In 2007, Google reported that it was 25% of searches were unique. And now in February of 2022, it was 15% of searches were unique. So we're dropping our uniqueness over time. I don't know, it was just one maybe old school reaction was the advent of mobile phones kind of killed off the bar trivia conversation. And that used to be the phrase that Googlers would use when they were talking about all the weird queries that they would get. It was basically, it's like, I don't know, how tall is Chuck Norris compared to, you know, somebody else? And it's like random stuff like that. And it's like these weird little conversations that turn into these very unusual queries, right? And that was kind of the bar trivia thing. But it was also, mobile phones kind of killed off also kind of like the bar BS thing, because you could fact check anybody who was coming up with some ridiculous story, or like, no, I heard it was this and that kind of thing. And you're like, let me take out my phone and figure it out. Mm-hmm. AI is like the next generation of that, where we have now these very complete answers coming back instead of just like I asked for this quick little snippet of data and I got only this snippet of data that I got. It didn't give me any of the additional information that could have been around that or perspective or anything like that with it too. So I don't know, just taking this from like a culture and personality standpoint, the more we interrupt data sources with the expectation that those data sources are going to be perfect, especially if we're practicing our verbal mannerisms this way, not great. Mm-hmm. We definitely need to understand the limits of AI and the expectations there versus how we're going to be treating, for instance, our fellow coworkers and interns and anybody else who might be a subject matter expert, but won't have the answer immediately, and they will have to say, "I'll have to get back to you," and that still should be a good answer.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point. Like, there are going to be a large number of unintended consequences that come out of the emergence of this technology. I think the death of bar trivia is one of them, but I think what you just articulated, Alex, is another good one, which is the expectations of people as they're seeking information change drastically with this technology around. And our sort of need to have instant answers seems like an important one.
The other piece of it too is, if you look at Copilot or Google Workspaces, and there are some cool things with Google Workspace that they announced as well, but I'll push that aside for right now. Managers are not well known for guessing timelines very well, right? So like, give me this presentation in 2 days. Well, okay, I can hit that timeline if I'm using the generative AI to, take my Word outline into a PowerPoint. But if your manager is aware of that technology and your access to that technology, now all of a sudden, yeah, you have 2 hours to give me this presentation? No. No. So it's going to be interesting. And the other thing that they made a really big deal about was how now available to everybody will be a 1 million token context window, which is a lot. You know, they were like, to be funny, you know, as funny as Google is capable of being, they're like, that's 96 Cheesecake Factory menus. I'm like, okay, well, those are really large menus. But it's also, I mean, talk about lowest common denominator, like most inoffensive restaurant ever. So the other thing is you'll be able to upload so many documents and like so many papers, so many ebooks, so many whatevers to then create as a reference your outline for things. Like that could be really cool if you are using it justly and appropriately, you know, but as people with SEO backgrounds, you know, there's a whole reason there's a white hat, black hat debate. We know there's going to be, you know, the black hat uses of all these things too. I worry about the depth of thought, you know, like if I can just take an ebook and say, okay, give me the 5 points out of this thing. That's not all that different than just reading the executive summary and calling it good. But if you actually spend time with something and think through it, you will have a better understanding of the implications of it, a better understanding of what it is they were researching, you know, while you're doing it. Now, that's not to say that every ebook is worth reading. I would say most aren't. But yeah, there's a depth of thought there that I worry about.
I will say for Google, and this is true of GPTs, but those things that you just articulated, those are the makeup of my fantastic onboarding GPT plan. That's it. We want to upload the things so that other people can ask their questions and quickly get answers. So maybe the value isn't so much on I upload my entire repository of work so that I can reference it. It's I upload my repository of work so that somebody else can reference it and easily be able to find the things that they need to answer their questions so that the manager doesn't need you to create the PowerPoint presentation. They've just asked the question and gotten the answer that much faster.
So this is yet another reason for you to go back and watch the recording, Ruthi, because in the workspace demo that they did, they are now, for people who are willing to give up that amount of data, you can create an AI teammate. And that AI teammate will attend the meetings, will look at all of the documents that are made available to it as the teammate. You write its job description and you tell it what tasks to do, and it just runs in the background so that instead of sending the, you know, Slack or Teams message to your coworker about the project status update, you can say, you know, Google teammate, what, you know, did so-and-so agree to keep this project running, or was it killed in the last meeting? And it will say, based on the transcript, here's what they agreed on at this meeting. And then that's you can say, great, make a presentation for it. And all of that is wonderful. Because, you know, how many presentations have you wasted entire weeks on just for the, you know, 20 minutes you get to talk about it, and then you've done nothing. Like literally nothing other than a deck, you know? So I'm excited to move past that, but that particular feature has some interesting implications for the way teams work, the amount of people you need on said team. You know, I sent it to one of my project manager friends and said, well, there goes the business analyst and the project manager. Because, you know, if you're able to automate actions in your project management tool, which is sort of an easy next step, I think, in the development roadmap. Yeah, you just won't need that. You just won't need that. So, which is great because I hate project management tickets. I hate writing them so much. Just let me do it. I told you I would do it. I'll do it. But I know that's not how the world works. Yeah.
I mean, the optimistic take, and then I'll pass it over to Alex because I feel like this is a really good segue. But the optimistic take is this cuts out the sort of busy work of work so that we can focus on getting things done and doing the cool stuff and working together. I do have a couple of question marks around, what does this do for the entry level position? What does this do for the intern for whom sometimes those tasks are the way that you get familiar with just all the mechanics of everything that's going around. Like it's something that's very straightforward. You can do it. Doesn't take a lot of in-depth knowledge of the organization or the things that you're doing in order to just be able to start doing something and learning. So that role shifts perhaps with this. But on your advice, I will go watch it and perhaps we can discuss it more in an upcoming episode. But I do want to pass it over to Alex because I feel like he might have some levity to the situation of how long is it really going to take, though?
It's an excellent question. So, I was using Microsoft Copilot and using it in a work capacity. Pros and cons. I mean, there's across the board and kind of what it's capable of doing. What it is really OpenAI. I don't know, over a year ago, they were promising about an enterprise version that would not be used, the data would not be used to train its overall model. Instead, it would be internal. It would be looking at your own files and whatever you've allowed it to have access to. And that is Microsoft Copilot. They call you the pilot of the thing, by the way, as a user. You're a pilot. Just that little cheesiness.
That's a nice fallacy of control there. That's
I know, going back to the Google, let it Google for you. Yeah. I mean, especially from the advertising standpoint, Google's gotten really, really annoying. Being an advertiser, they've gotten really annoying, but how pushy they are about just tell us an overall objective and we'll spend your money for you. Which, no conflict of interest there. No bias. Goodness. But anyways, back to Copilot. Copilot is pretty cool with certain capabilities. So if you're recording a meeting on Teams, you can ask it for a recap. And if you join the meeting half hour late, it will give you a recap of this is what happened. This person said this. And from what I've seen, accurate. It works actually really well. You can ask, and they'll even give you a notification like 10 minutes before the end of the meeting saying, hey, ask Copilot for the action items. You have 10 minutes left for your meeting. So you can click that and it's a shortcut prompt and it'll run back through the transcript and tell you kind of what the next steps were and who promised what and all the rest. For meetings, especially when there's a ton of teams doing a ton of different updates and you're just kind of going one, next one, super helpful. Especially if you're trying to review past ones, very helpful. And then it gets to internal policies on how long do you keep your old videos? How many of these videos are you storing? Because that's a lot of honestly server space. I mean, you're starting to hit some limits in some other ways too of what's realistic. And then internal kind of OneDrive searching, not bad. It kind of is a little bit better than what the internal search already is in OneDrive and across your shared kind of files and team files. Outlook was cool. I did, if you prompt correctly, I mean, and I'm sure this will improve with time as well. I asked it to look through my sent box and say, what action items have I promised recently? And it gave me a good list. Then as I tried to ask, I was like, okay, what about older emails? Because I only looked at like the last week. And immediately it started going through the wrong folders, pulling up randomly in newsletters and I don't know, other kind of junk. So, I mean, still some work in progress there as well. And then from a training standpoint, Microsoft is trying to come up with use case-based training to try to push this. So meant for executives, meant for sales, meant for marketing. And the marketing one I attended was honestly pointless. It's like you can ask it for a business case on how toy sales are going. And then you can ask it more questions about that. It's like, it's not a marketing specific use case. And Definitely some missteps on what it could and couldn't do there. I mean, they could have pushed everything from Microsoft Ads to talking about like improved copy for, a flyer if you want to go old school. I mean, not really even relevant to today, but you can still go for that. Or you could have it come up with different designs because it is pulling in DALL-E and then it is pulling in some other systems too. So DALL-E with a credit-based system, some limitations there too.
Mm-hmm.
Also, got to imagine these licenses are not cheap. My company's doing a pilot program, so we've got a set number of licenses for a pilot, and we'll go from there.
I will say that I am excited about the meeting summary. So I'm on vacation this week. I've been literally gardening all week, which is why I haven't been paying attention to any AI news and why Dave has to update me and everything. It's been fantastic.
You're better.
It's wonderful. It's got a nice tan going in the whole 9 yards. But when I come back from vacation, I've got Copilot there to tell me, here's what you missed. I'm very excited to see how it does. Of course, I'm not going to rely on it completely. And I'm sure it'll have gaps. But I think that'll be a really cool second use case. I would say the first use case I've found so far is that OneDrive piece. I've had a lot more success with it than sounds like Alex has, where I've asked different questions of like, hey, when did we talk about this random thing that was probably in a deck, or I use the Notes app in Windows. I know I'm really old school. It does great with those. It can find everything and then summarize the random notes I had taken from a meeting 2 years ago in response, and then give me the source of my own document or the document of a teammate. So that's been quite helpful. One thing that I haven't gotten to work, and I don't know if it's a limitation of how we've set up our file structure or if it's Copilot, is it doesn't yet integrate OneNote, which is where a lot of our files are kept. In addition, once the integration with something like Jira Confluence is available or Figma, that's going to tear the roof off of it, because all of a sudden you've got access to everything you or your team or other teams have created, and you can get those quick responses. So I'm pretty optimistic about that. But one thing that Alex mentioned about those trainings is like, he said it himself, these are things we were testing out with GPT a year ago. And now they're starting to train the rest of the world on it, which gives you a sense of here's perhaps the level of knowledge and the level of use of perhaps the more average corporate user of these different tools. I don't think they're doing it to give this sort of dummy version just for fun. I think that's a realistic assessment of where they think most people are with these tools, which, gives me a little pause when I think about sort of Dave's forward-looking projections. It's like, well, there is a little bit of a lag when it comes to the rest of the world on these things.
Absolutely. So a couple of things on that. So yesterday, Adobe is doing their little roadshow thing where they're touring around the country, showcasing some of their stuff. And it was a good excuse to get out of the home office and be wined and dined, because why not? But it was, I was saying to Ruthi before we hit record, it was really interesting because they were showcasing Adobe Express for enterprise. And if Adobe Express has just been, on my introduction to it was on the iPad and on the iPhone as more of a consumer play around, whatever. And so, for my side stuff for this podcast, I am really deep in the Canva universe, and what they were showcasing and the features they were so excited about. I was like, I've been doing that for 5 years on Canva. Like and so like you can resize your design. Like, yeah, that's great. It's an amazing feature because you design once and then you just, fiddle a little bit and boom, you have your YouTube and Insta and TikTok and whatever else. They did have some really cool features that would be worth looking into and playing around with. So, like we've discussed before, I think I'll probably go experiment just to see what's out and available. But to your point, Ruthi, it was a good reminder of, the three of us tend to be, bleeding edge people. Like, we want to find what's out there, what's new. How do we adapt this, or do we ignore it? and sitting and talking with some other people and some other major organizations in the Twin Cities area was very interesting, because it was not at all what I expected to hear. What people are using, how they're doing it. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see the adoption curve on this. Again, I think with Google and the amount of data that Google has available to it, one of the big takeaways, like watching the ChatGPT nearly after the I/O announcements, it was very clear that all of the extra data that Google has available to it enable it to do all of these other things. And that's going to be something that GPT is just, and OpenAI is really going to have to contend with. Because, if you're only relying on available sources or licensing for your training or synthetic data for your training, that's going to be very limiting very quickly. But if you can get AI to people via the Google app, even the free version of it, now you have all of the new data, the new queries, the new use cases that people are using on their phone, on their tablets, via a method they already have. So I don't have to go download a desktop version of OpenAI or create an OpenAI account. I have my Google account. I sign up for, Gemini and can query it really easily. That is a massive competitive advantage, I think, for Google, and the fact that they invented the transformer. So, right. Like that certainly helps.
I think taking that and running with it, and then maybe segueing to GPT for a sec, having the platform and sort of the established user base who's already working in a certain way is huge for Google. I think that's going to be perhaps even more of a one-up for Meta, which I haven't played around with anything that they've done yet or even paid attention. But I know that in the background, they've secretly got a very, very strong LLM. And so I'm curious to see how they are going to utilize that within Instagram and Facebook. Because as you mentioned, like, people don't have to, they're already there. Like, now all of a sudden they can just use it in a place they're already going, which could perhaps even be more of a big deal for Meta than it is for Google. That is baseless speculation, but we can come back in a year and see how accurate that is. Well,
yeah. And the one thing to call out too, between the Google and the Meta example, Meta is exclusively an open source design. Their Llama models are open source. I have very strong opinions on open source things, which will be something for a different episode. Where Google is very much the walled garden. And that was one of the things that I was definitely thinking about in watching these announcements was, okay, Microsoft has the Copilot piece, and it's very much a Microsoft software thing. It has a lot of promise, and then the execution of it is junk until about 5 years later, they finally figure out what they promised. And yeah, like, having that collection of users and people who already use your software or your hardware really is just going to create these, I am a Google user, I am a Microsoft user, even more so than we already have today. And I mean, we talked about this in previous episodes with like the cloud computing piece, right? Like, for the larger companies that are going to be experimenting with AI, well, it's much easier to experiment with whoever your cloud provider is and what they're offering, because it's already been through, IT security. You don't have to try to get, too much more additional budget because it's somebody you already have a service agreement with. So yeah.
Throwing out the other big company, Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really seen too much from them. It seems like they're definitely going on the server side. I mean, AWS is now a big chunk of Amazon's revenue. Mm-hmm. I was thinking about that Rufus tool that I was playing around with I think it was about a week ago or something like that. I was asking Rufus how to fall in love and how to find the perfect mate and what the meaning of life was. Which, if you're not familiar,
aren't you married?
I wanted to see if it would show up with 42. A little geekery there. I was trying to get it to basically give that answer. But if you go on Amazon app, scroll down to basically where the reviews are, and you can basically ask a question. And what that used to be was basically a very small internal search that would just go through the reviews, and you would keyword pick and then say, here's some people who said similar things, become more a question and answer sort of a experience there, based only off of the reviews for that one given product. That's been replaced with Rufus, which is their name for their AI. You can ask it what its name is, and it'll tell you what its name is and what the limitations are. It also will not talk about Amazon's ethical practices. There's a number of things it will not talk about. I was just having a lot of fun playing around with this thing. But you can ask it whatever question you want. So I was looking at, I think it was like shelving for a garage or something like that. And I asked it what the meaning of life was, and started talking about like philosophy. And we started getting into like, it has no memory.
Amazing.
I know it was obviously like an LLM that was trained across all of Amazon's data, but also and more to try to create that, verbal appearance, which also means you can query the rest of its data set too, which was just pretty funny. I don't know. I am surprised though that, again, talking about this, like the next step piece, the tech is there.
Yes.
So I could ask Rufus instead at the very beginning of my Amazon journey. I was saying, hey, this is what I'm trying to accomplish. What's the product that best fits that?
Right.
But it isn't. They're still internal search, still ranking results, still the bestseller, buy now kind of button top. The same setup basically, because imagine how much A/B testing and how much work has gone into what they currently have, and they know it works and it's profitable. How much do they want to rock the boat by basically introducing this into it or on top of it? I mean, this is like a very, very small, weird. I mean, actually, Rufus has been out for over a year, and I never noticed it. And I shop on Amazon probably too much, and I go through reviews all the time, but I never noticed it for this entire period of time. So it's kind of there, but it's not really, prominent.
And what are the numerous implications to having Rufus start spitting out, here's the best product for X? Right.
Yeah.
The whole Amazon's a marketplace, right?
Yeah.
And how do you allow Rufus to sort of represent all your different vendors rather than signaling on a couple of few? And let's say those couple of few become Rufus's favorites. Do they even have the infrastructure for supporting the deluge of people who are now all of a sudden going to be ordering from them? Right. There's some real world implications to what Rufus does, and maybe they've sort of quietly hid him because they're not they're sort of in testing. Maybe they're not ready.
Well, and if Rufus favors
too powerful, that Rufus
Amazon basics over, that's some real
the lawsuit
problems. Yeah. I mean, the so what of it too is like the tech, your point's very, very well hitting home for me, which is the so what. If the tech's there, you have to retrain everybody how to use your platform. Right. And that's one of the things with the implications for search marketing, I think is interesting to think about, because for some people's entire lives, you go, this is Google, this is how you search for something. It has a very specific cadence, right? With new restaurants near me.
Right.
Alex, to your point with one of the previous episodes we recorded, like that is not a natural way of asking something. That is not a natural way of typing something, speaking something. So now that, you can do so much more with voice search, with image searching, or there's a lot of implications there. And I've gotten a lot of benefit of just taking a breath and going, I wonder if I can do this with AI, because there is so much in the day-to-day that you can absolutely automate through things like
Okay, I have been attempting to segue into ChatGPT this whole time. And the reason I want to segue is because I think one of the things you said is so cool, Dave. Like, I still have to think about this mobile whiteboard situation. I think I'm going to have several use cases for that, for sure. Big fan of whiteboarding. But one of the things I'm really excited about is what you talked about, the screen sharing. And I think this is one of the differentiators that they're sort of playing into. They don't necessarily have the Google, the Amazon, the Facebook platform that people are already glued into, although I suspect OpenAI has a decent user base at this point. But one of the things that's so cool about that is now all of a sudden you've got an AI who's coming along for the ride with you. They can see quotes what you're seeing, and you can talk to it. And so I can imagine so many cool use cases. First one that came to mind when you originally said this was accessibility. The poor people who have to use the internet and use screen readers have such a hard time. You know, even if we try to optimize our websites for screen readers, it's still just ultimately it's optimized for people who can see the site. So the idea that you can have sort of an AI assistant there to describe what's on the scene in real language with voice and all the images and what's relevant and what's not, that I think is going to be a really cool thing for a lot of people. And then the other thing that came into mind is, boy, some of the things that OpenAI and these other LLMs are capable of, you could be, say, reading one of those long form articles, or you could be reading a book, and you could be discussing and talking to your AI as you're reading through. You could feed the other works that a given author has done. So you can see, okay, where is this pulling from? Have they talked about this elsewhere? Has she looked at this? Has she talked about this? What are the other articles? I think that in terms of delving deep and sort of being able to explore a step further than you can do currently with search and references, this has a lot of potential, and I'm very excited about it.
Mm-hmm. One of the interesting cases for me recently was earnings calls. God, those can be so dry and awful, you know. But so I am a big fan of doing competitive analysis, and I do that a lot. Even when I'm not asked to, I still want to see what the competition is doing. So instead of doing what I normally do, which is a very involved process, I went ahead to Gemini and I said, tell me about their recent performance. What were the takeaways from the recent earnings calls? And it's just pop, 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 pop. And it started reading it to me. Like I didn't even have to read the output because it automatically started, talking to me. That was really cool because right away I just saved an hour. I have a general idea of what's going on, and then I can look at the stock articles that are written by like Reuters or Bloomberg or anybody else to see, is this kind of true? What the LLM, popped out. And it was very nice. It was very quick. And to your point about accessibility, that was one of my thoughts at the Adobe presentation, because like even just if you took color blindness, for example, how often are you in meetings with people where they're like, oh, we're going to do this yellow. And you're like, please don't. Or here's this like really neon green. And you're like, stop. Please just stop. Like that. I mean, that's a real thing. So to be able to lay over or have a tool built into your design thing to be able to toggle on and off, colorblind filters, like that's pretty cool, because now all of a sudden that's just an extra step that is fairly easy to do with, a push button, in order to make it more accessible for everybody else and get the approvals that you need more quickly, even if you're not a super, amazing wizard of design. Like you can still move a picture around and think about it.
check out, I think it's accessible.io. We can toss it in the chat with the real one. But it's a little widget that you can toss on your website that allows people to change your website based off of their needs. So if they need larger text, if they need more contrast in the imagery, and it allows the user to do what they want in a really cool way that sounds a lot like some of the things you were describing.
That's cool. Alex, you were looking like you had some thoughts.
I just had an interesting one. I was just working through a local search thing recently. And local search, Google Maps and all the rest of their systems are always kind of fascinating because there's White Spark produces, I think it was David Mim who originally did it, but it's called the local search ecosystem. If you ever look for the thing, it's all the years and how it kind of has passed through the many years. It's really cool because you can see Google Maps, for instance, pulls data from these 4 sources, and those 4 sources pull their data from these sources. So how does basically one listing of one company get it on all these different sites? Well, it's because they buy and share, and there's data aggregators out there as well that you can't submit to, but they pull in data from other sources as well. All that kind of stuff gets shared around. And the other thought was there's a really cool YouTube channel that I've been just binging like crazy, but it's a guy who does very quick shorts on different restaurants, food trucks, you name it, in the New York City area. And it's most of it's focused around basically who these people are, a little bit of the story behind them, and the main dish that they produce. And it's been really cool. And these kind of pieces all are kind of fitting together, in the idea of how marketing works today is very, very different. Because of new products, new locations, new sources, new product introductions, the amount of content and citations and sources and video and photo and text that you're going to need to make your restaurant work, to make your new product on Amazon work, to make your new product and anywhere, anything, new business location, whatever work, has to be accompanied by a massive amount of content. And I'm sure the platforms will pull in some of that. I mean, Google's gotten really good about their Maps listing saying here's how to take photos. You need to have 3 photos. It's starting to have requirements basically kind of pushed upon it to make sure that people are providing that content that's necessary. Right. But thinking about the random, new to the city, maybe new to the country individual who's trying to put together a food truck, unless people are walking around with your example of the glasses and the Apple sort of systems that are actually going to track and find these locations and read the menus, right, it's going to be really tough to break into those markets. Same way we were talking about Rufus, in terms of if you have 0 reviews and you're brand new and you're great at making a really innovative product, but you suck at writing copy and you just put in the bare minimum for the description,
right,
you're sunk, not because of your quality of product, but because of the amount of content.
I'm going to give you the flip side of that, because I think that that's a 2-sided coin, because I think you've identified a really important one, especially where it's content in some ways matters as much as the quality of the product, which it is kind of a bummer in one case. I think the positive side of that is if you're a new entry into the market, you've got a way in which you can join the market. You can get over the barrier to entry by having content. And so that's kind of cool too, because there's a route in which you can enter a market that could be saturated, or, maybe you're a small restaurant, maybe you're a small farm, and you are not necessarily within the confines of the city. You've got a way of accessing the people in the city, even though maybe you're 30 minutes out. And that's kind of cool too, that increases your entry to market in a way that perhaps you couldn't do with newspaper and television advertising.
Well, I think it depends on what you're trying to sell as well, because we've seen this a lot lately, where if you take advantage of the user-generated content more so than just your own, right? Think of the apple orchards that create the Instagrammable, backdrop for you to, go with their branding and, sit on the hay bale with, this, and you have your family photo, and you can create those experiences or those opportunities for people to do that. Right. Or and a lot of the small businesses that I've gone to recently, there's that, the QR code right next to the pay terminal for leave a review. And they have a bunch of those things around their location for you to be able to do that. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways to get into it, even if you're not the one generating it. But Alex, I think you're right. If you don't know about the copywriting piece for your product, you're not going to be able to rank because you don't have it keyword optimized. You don't have it at the proper length, the whatever. Or if they offer a product description helper tool via AI, well then great. You have just met the same low floor as everyone else that's trying to sell it, which may be exactly what you need and be just fine.
Sure.
But
I think to be honest, this might be saving grace for marketers in the age of AI. Is the game hasn't changed, to be honest. Yeah. I mean, let's say pre-internet, the big thing was the digital divide of getting a website up, which is, to be honest, content and marketing. And then after that, we're talking about like there's the economy of links, which ranks people higher and lower. So there is, reaching out to different organizations if you're doing it a legitimate way, or buying them if you're doing the illegitimate way. Either way, they're there. Right. Then we have the economy of reviews, trying to push for extra reviews on your Yelp listing to get your restaurant up, or buying a bunch of crap ones off of Fiverr to get your Amazon listing up. I mean, however it works out for you. I mean, right. Again, this is kind of like, this is the game. I was just thinking about the ebook point, and Amazon recently dropped the number of ebooks you can submit to per day is down to 3, because it used to be like 10 or 12 a day. Imagine the quality of content that was being produced is not great, but massive amount of content. There's a few rather small scale authors who I've been reading their ebooks recently. And at the end of the book, they say, please join my Facebook community, these Reddit channels that are of the genres, and I get posted on there whenever I have a new book, because I'm in this very niche genre. Right. Follow this newsletter so that I can let you know when these books are coming out. You can pre-order the next one off of Amazon already. I mean, that's the game. That's the marketing game. Like, they're an author. Do they really want to be doing social media posts? Probably not. They want to probably be writing their book. But that's the game in a new world now. Like, how do they get, online and ebook sales way? Well, they got to do it that way. Yeah.
And I think to your point, what has changed? It's the way in which we do things.
Sure.
What hasn't changed is anybody who has something to say and is able to say it in a venue that is trusted and has reach will prevail, right? Like I was thinking of, so I'm a fan of the Prof G podcast, and I listen to. I'm not like a religious listener, but I enjoy it when I choose to listen to it. And he recently did a TED talk that was not your typical TED talk, so it was a lot of fun. But he talked about how there was this huge spike in downloads on his podcast. Like, well, yeah, you have the ecosystem set up, and then you went and you did your TED event, and then people who saw you at the TED event, then the next night you were on the Bill Maher show. So your exposure to these audiences on these, bigger platforms is absolutely what's driving the interest. It's really that getting the exposure to a wide variety of people. None of that has changed. That's classic. That's classic PR, So I think that what might be dying, which is what some of the digital marketers or SEOs that are really scared about, is you can't just passively launch something and then hope success hits you. You have to go after it, right?
Yeah.
All of Alex's tactics are just that. They're just tactics.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, your tactic that you've specialized in might be going away. True story.
I was actually wondering that with we mentioned PowerPoint a few times during this. Is that still going to be a thing? Like, I don't know, just thinking about like these summaries and synopsis of information, different way that people like to learn. I mean, some audio, text, visual, however they want it. Maybe it'll just get better. Maybe it'll just become the next envisioned version of it. I don't know.
Well, Amazon is a no PowerPoint company, and that seems to be working out for them. Yeah, I think it'll just change. It'll just change. Clearly, these are fun ideas to think about and talk about and mull over. We will see how they actually impact how we move forward on this. Let us know your experiences with these things, any knee-jerk reactions to the presentations that happened, and we will see you in the next episode of Enterprising Minds. Please like, subscribe, and share. That does help us a lot and lets us know what you enjoy and what you would like to see more of. So rate and reviews and all of that stuff. And we'll see you next time. Thanks.
Thanks.
Cheers.